time is now 6:30. I'd like to call this regular Board of Finance meeting to order. Please join us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Tom Sinkowitz, John Carell. Here. Dean Gorman. Here. Ted Dumaine. Here. Terry Stallabine.
Here.
Matt Reed.
Present.
Keith Shealy is absent, and Dodie is not here, so Kelly is here. We'll be filling in recording. Matt, you have voting rights for this meeting?
I accept.
All right, next item, acceptance of the minutes for the May 19th, 2021 meeting. Minutes were sent out and distributed. Questions, comments?
I'll make a motion to accept the
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second to accept the minutes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, first item under new business, to fill Board of Finance vacancy. So, effective as of June 1st, Travis Irons had officially submitted his letter of resignation to the town clerk's office, and I also received a copy of it, and that, of course, is due to the fact that he is now a deputy fire marshal for the town and had to step down based on financial interest. So, with regret, Travis's letter of resignation was accepted. Certainly going to miss working with him, enjoyed it for several years. But now that he has officially stepped down, we have a vacancy on the board. So the way the process works is that we have the ability as the Board of Finance to fill this vacancy within 30 days of the letter of resignation. If we do not succeed in doing that, then the filling of the vacancy would go to the Board of Selectmen having the ability to do that. So the only person that has expressed interest officially for possibly filling the vacancy is Virginia, who is with us this evening. She sent a letter in to the town clerk, as well as myself, which was around June 3rd. So nobody else, to my knowledge, is interested in the position, but certainly if so, this would be the time to note it. But as of now, because Virginia is the only one that I know of who is interested, I would like to, just before we take any action, give her a moment to just introduce herself and just mention anything as far as your interest in the Board of Finance.
Most of you, I haven't met you really before, but I have served twice on the Board of Selectmen. I've been on planning and zoning. I've been on the chairman of the school board for quite a while also. I've worked with many of you. And most recently, I've been on charter revision. So I like to serve the town, and I feel that I was an economic major in college. That was a long time ago because I'm 70 years old now, so, but, I feel I could be valuable to this commission, so thank you. The first selectman did mention to me that if you did vote on me tonight, I probably should get sworn in by the town clerk before I actually join.
Correct, yeah. It was the same thing I know, like with Dean, when he was brought on, he was, certainly became, a member, but could not vote on anything, could not do anything officially until he got sworn.
Okay,
So same.
very good,
Yep.
thank you.
What is your last name?
San Pietro. I was at Cray. I still live in my grandmother's house in Lusa.
All right, so at this time, I would like to open the floor for nominations to fill the Board of Finance vacancy.
I'll nominate Virginia San Pietro to fill in Board of Finance vacancy.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Virginia. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I will now close nominations for filling the Board of Finance vacancy.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Chair, or?
We can take a motion. I don't officially need it, but certainly can.
I'll move to close nominations.
I'll second.
Very good. nominations are closed. So at this time, with the nomination for Virginia San Pietro, all in favor of Virginia filling the Board of Finance vacancy appointment, which would be effective today, and as soon as she gets sworn in, and it would end as of November, because it's only good through Election Day. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Virginia, thank you very much for volunteering.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for your support.
yep. And so, get sworn in as soon as possible, and then our next meeting is, I believe, the 21st of July, that third Wednesday. See you back here then.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item, to appoint Board of Finance Vice Chairman. So that was another thing that Travis had done for several years, as he was annually re-elected as our Vice Chair for several years. Enjoyed working with him in that position, but then once he resigned, of course, that position became available. It doesn't automatically go to necessarily who fills the position. It's up to the board to decide who would then fill that office position. But again, like with the vacancy, it would only take effect as of now and go through November, and then at our November regular meeting for Board of Finance, we have our election of officers, and so it could change, could remain, whoever we may choose tonight. Same thing with my position as chair, and then Gary is currently serving as secretary. So, are there any nominations for appointing the vice chair for the Board of Finance?
Is everybody interested?
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody here was interested, because I know I asked certainly that question beforehand, just out of curiosity. And personally, if I was to make the nomination, I would like to nominate Ted Dumaine. I know I can work with him if he was to be the vice chair.
I'll make the motion for Ted. I'll second.
Okay? Anybody else to be nominated for vice chair?
I'll move that we close nominations.
A second.
Okay, they're closed for nominations. So at this time, with the nomination for Ted Dumaine for Board of Finance Vice Chairman, again effective as of today through November, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Ted, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, next item, to discuss and act on the Board of Selectmen line item transfers. At Monday's meeting of the Board of Selectmen, the line item transfers were officially presented and accepted by the board. Kevin took the time to go over them. I will certainly recognize them, given the opportunity to mention, again, really the big ones here. And then we also have our Chief of Police with us, so if anything pertaining to the specific police ones, certainly if any board members have any questions, you can be available to answer those. Kevin?
Sure, thank you very much. It is a rather lengthy list. You'll notice that there are a mix of things that we had shortages in for certain departments. There was an opportunity for the remaining monies that we had left over to see if we could purchase some of the items in the 5-year capital. And that helps us for future, because now if you don't have to look for those to be purchased and completed, the one-time purchases, it does help for future. I can go line by line and we can go through each one. General index, as you can see, the town clerk has a digital booking. We were short there, so we decided to try to guesstimate the amount of money that might be needed, and we came up with $6,000 for that. You had a fire marshal department head, and we had also a person working to train and support that individual once they were hired. So that's why there's an overrun there, because we had 2 people working to help and support the town for that. So that was $15,000 for that. Supplies for buildings and grounds, we did have to get the purchase of a new tractor. About a week and a half ago, well, actually 2 weeks ago, we had a tractor that had been around for 16 years, and we replaced a clutch in it first. Second time we replaced the clutch in it, it caught fire. So it was no longer in service, and that's why we're catching up right now with doing all of our mowing as best we can. You have contracted services for highway, which is the uniforms. There was a shortage there this year. I'm going to be working with our acting supervisor to see if we can minimize the cost for that for next year. But as it stands right now, there's an overrun and we need to do transfers for that. We're looking, some of these items, next items coming up are part of the 5-year capital items. You'll notice that there's a AC it's a HVAC for the town clerk's office upstairs in the upper area and downstairs in the vault. We estimated at about 14. Just ran across a piece of paper today that told us that we had been in violation since 2007. So we do need to do this, and we will be looking to require that a fix for that right away. The other one here, the next one is the largest one on the list, and that's the AC for the auditorium. In our budget, we had actually passed. We talked about the auditorium, but we're really looking to do the rest of the town hall. We do have enough money available for that. Checking with Kelly, we walked through the books and made sure we have enough. That's why it's in here for a line item transfer. And so goes on to the next one, which is the police gas generator. I suggested that based on the fact that it was also in the 5-year capital and it fit within the monies we had left over. I think it's also good to have it as a backup, and that's what it was meant to be. It was a backup. Next one up is the animal control roof. It was, if you note in the 5-year capital, it was less than that, but with the cost of materials nowadays, it jumped up. So we wanted to do that and get that completed. There's an ADA compliant town clerk counter. Make sure we're safe here, and also we aim over to the Lions Park and the track. So we're trying to do that with this money. There's town hall building repair, miscellaneous items that will occasionally break, and we have begged, borrowed, and helped each other out from other departments and other buildings. That's why that number's in there. Refuse disposal is a small overage, and that's why we're just going to clean up the numbers on that one. We do anticipate for legal that will go into 20. Some of that is some of the projects that have been coming in. We've been asking for support for Amazon, and matter of fact, I was on a call today for that. So that's why that number is 20,000. Engineering, I think I've gone through in the 5-year capital, if you note, all the different items that were in the 5-year capital. We talked about the bridge project, Dow Road Bridge project. We just received, there's an application we put in. We didn't know if we were going to get it or not, and it came in. So it was $700,000, but it's a matching grant, so the town pays half, the state pays half. So we're looking to make sure that all the engineering part of it was done. All the different projects that we've had around town, the engineers worked on, that helps us out tremendously. That's just one of them. He's done a lot of different projects. You'll notice in the police supplies, that is for $25,000. We have a video surveillance system that we'd like to replace and with your blessings be able to do. So that's why that number's there. Dispatcher salaries, it's hard to keep dispatchers. And a lot of that is filling in from one to the other, and overtime is accrued. That's why that number is that for the 8,000. I think this is police vehicle repairs. I think we got the expense for that. Yep. So that's $1,000 there. Police overtime, similar to the dispatchers, they've been running short for the year. So in the 12-hour shifts, also make it so that if someone has to stay, you're splitting the shift, so they're getting overtime and doing, instead of a 12-hour, they're doing an 18. So that's why the overtime is listed here. But not too much, but a little bit, just to make sure we're covering. Police training, you have 3 new officers that have started, so that's why the police training, and the same thing with the police uniforms, we've got to make sure that they have what they need. So that's why those numbers are there. And then we have the need for the, well, we have the money, to seal the police parking lot and the painting of the lines again out over the top. That's what you're looking at for what we're requesting. And where do we get the money from? Down below you'll see we do have a little bit of money left over for supplies for the town clerk. There is money left over from heart and hypertension. So far so good with the Social Security and unemployment benefits. And we did have, we put a little bit too much, I guess, into the EDC salaries. We really didn't know when that grant writer would be coming in, so that's why that number's there. The video screen for the police, sorry, we're not going to get that this year, but that's why that number's listed. Excellent work on the health insurance this year. We have savings of 113, and then police salaries from the officers that weren't hired throughout the year. That's a little the savings that are there. You'll see in the next page, police holiday pay, anticipated savings there, and utilities as well. Council of Governments, I guess we They gave us a number that was a little different from what we actually paid out on, so that's why there's some money available there. And we didn't have all the referendums and so forth, so we did have some money in the election for supplies and the election workers. They saved some money on sand and gravel. It wasn't that bad. Matter of fact, they're still sweeping what they have out there. And same thing with highway utilities. There was some savings. We did not use any of the money for relocation. So this year, that's why the $5,000 that was put in there is available now. And the same thing with marketing. We didn't do as much marketing for economic development. And there's a little bit of money left over for the workers' comp. The totals will match $331,530. And I'd be willing to entertain any questions about these.
Just curious, like Chief, do they need to come to us if he can move money around within his own department? I'm not sure.
It's like any other department. It really has to be something, but
Yeah, so I'll look and go through, and then I'll forward the transfers to the first selectman for also his blessing, and then come to the board here.
I was going to say, if it's already approved, you know, like, you could have just, you know, do these other items, you know, I wasn't sure.
Right, it's just to go through the
I'm not
proper process, yeah.
Okay.
otherwise you do that for every department. But that's why we do that, is just to make sure that we're all transparent about what we're doing, where the money comes from each department.
I mean, I can see going from PD to planning or whatever, you know, I can see that, but within...
If that's something you want to make as a
Oh,
policy
I'll-
later
just-
on,
just
but I
a
don't think that's a
question.
good idea.
There's also, I know, the thought process of we've had two different ways kind of in the history of the Board of Finance of how the line of transfers is done. Used to be, I know under Paul's time, a massive list would accumulate over the course of the fiscal year, and we would be going over that right now.
Right.
Difference, of course, with Kevin, and I know Kathy have done the same thing, was that we've broken it up kind of throughout the year.
Yes.
Which, to me, I mean, I think it's good to kind of go through manageable lists, kind of through multiple meetings, as opposed to, let's for the next, half hour, be going over 8 pages worth of line of transfers. But it was also to know that these things, of course, already took effect. They already happened. It's just we got to go through the process of reviewing and approving.
The other thing to note for the public to understand is, well, how can we have this much money left over? Let's go back to a year from that, from today, and you look at the fact that we didn't know how long we'd be in the COVID-19 throes, so to speak. And so what we did initially at the beginning of the year is we went into a freeze. We held on to everything at that point. And of course, recreation was one of the big ones where you couldn't do anything. There was no way to gather and do any recreation. So the monies that we saved from there, we've been utilizing for some transfers throughout the year. But really, I think we've done a very good job of holding back on major purchases. Fortunately, things haven't broken down as they could, but we have been blessed so far this year. And that's why there's a bulk of money left over throughout the year, and that's why you have that in front of you. On a normal year, you're looking at maybe $100,000, maybe a little more than that, on an average year where you might be able to do line item transfers. And you've seen it enough where that's what we do. It's just a matter of, this year was very strange because of all the things. We actually got money coming in from Storm Isaias, who I think is over $84,000 we got from that. That was returned to us because of the work that was done by the highway and the sewer. We got from COVID relief funding, which was helpful because it helped with the radios. So those are the things that happened during this year with COVID that allowed us to have an opportunity like this. And I would definitely say that I don't think you've ever seen something like this where you come at the end of the year and you go, we can purchase a lot of these 5-year capital items or do these other items because this is a great time to do it. That's why we put this money in front of you to discuss and see what your action would be.
Are you going to have any funds for the fund balance?
Yes. So,
I
Kelly?
estimate about 100,000. It might be more, depending on Amazon when we get our permits in. We're still waiting on that, but right now, about 100,000, you'll have to go back to the fund balance. It would be more if, when I review the financial statement, you'll see, it would be more if our revenue numbers came in, more.
Do you have any idea what kind of revenues the state are going to be bringing in from here?
For like next year,
No, for this year.
for this year. For additional revenue?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
They've given us everything.
Yeah, right now, only thing I know the state's working on is the additional COVID money for municipalities and school. That's getting dispersed to us, but not for operating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's restricted to what you
That's
can use it for.
specifically designed for that.
Yeah.
On a follow-up note to that, the other thing is that we've just received information from the state talking about the next year's funding. based on legislative work they've been doing. And it looks like pretty much everything's flat. So whatever the numbers are for this year, it looks like they're going to be coming in next year as well.
On the generator for the police department, is that going to be something that we can maintain? I know in the past Paul was doing it, wasn't he?
Correct, so,
Prior to Paul doing it, that used to cost us a fortune.
I'm sorry?
That used to cost a fortune prior to, used to have to get a
Correct.
guy out of Hartford.
The generator is as old as the building, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunately crashed out on several occasions, and obviously that powers only half of our building as well. So when that does kick on, we actually have to move things over from different outlets in different parts of the building, which is almost impossible now based on different rooms that need to have certain equipment. But you are correct. Chenille has done as much as he can with that, and that thing is really out the door. I don't know how much more really life it's got left, but I can tell you, based on his opinion, it ain't much.
But is he going to be able to maintain the new one?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the new one's gonna be large enough to handle everything?
Correct. So that the whole point of also replacing it is to make sure that it actually does the entire building, not sections of the building. It's not a residential home where you can just have certain things. I mean, the whole entire building actually needs to run off that generator, which we produce less energy now based on LED lighting and, you know, the energy saving equipment. So we do believe that the next one will be able to run the entire building. There'd be no point in actually replacing it if we're just going to run half again and go from there.
Question, the video screen that you're putting on hold, what was that for? The $8,000 expenditure?
If you note the video screens that are in front of the fire stations in Oregon and Moosup, similar to that, where it gives information to the public about meetings, like town meetings and events that are happening. It's a great location because it's right in the middle of Route 12 and it's a drive-by on both sides, everybody can see it. It's something I'd like to be able to do in the future because that is exactly the best place to have something like that. Whether events are happening, whether you could put any closure of a road or anything to that nature, like you put a nixle, could go onto that type of a system, but that's what we were thinking before.
Take the 9,000 out of ice rink and put it in.
Already purchased them.
The thing is that if it's going to be done right, and it's going to be done right because unfortunately, if you look at the one that is in Oregon, it's already having issues with it, and it really depends on how much you spend. Moosup Fire Department spent nearly double, and you can actually tell the difference between the two. It's not to downgrade any of them, but you can actually see the big difference. So you got to be willing to spend the right amount of money to make sure you do it right, so you're not replacing it within a year. Do I think it's a valuable tool? I think it's going to be a valuable tool because we're at the best location. We're right on the main strip of Route 12. I think it's a great informational setting for everybody, but we got to make sure if we're going to do it, we got to at least make sure we do it right.
Ballpark on a really good one, you're looking at 20.
You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Yep.
The one in Central doesn't cost that much. The
Where?
one in Central Village didn't cost 20.
I think that's manual, isn't it? You got to put all the things up.
Are you running out of leather? I think so.
That's it.
On the contract services, we've done that once already, haven't we?
Yes, that's why I want to talk to my supervisor to say that we have to be a little more frugal about that particular item.
And you only had one tractor in the B&G?
We did have two. One was a couple years ago, given away, and so we're down to
Yeah,
one.
we're one.
But just so you know, when we passed this budget, you notice that there was a Bobcat / and/or Ventrac. The Ventrac is a mower. So we'll have two again, and that way we can cover a lot more.
Is this the new one like a zero-turn type
Yes.
machine?
Kelly, do you remember what the total number was? I was talking to Kevin about it the other day. We were trying to do a ballpark, but I was curious if you could calculate total number of line item transfers that, you know, and that would be including if this was to be approved this fiscal year.
It was like 600,000.
661.
Yeah, 661. Thank you.
And that includes, of course, technically the line item transfer for the radio system was part of that.
Yeah.
So that was 108. And I have a, I can make make copies of this, but basically it's an overview of what is or was done per line item transfer.
Yeah, that was just a curiosity question. And of course, noting, as I think Kevin did before, I mean, during normal years, we wouldn't be near 600,000
No.
in line item transfers.
No.
As far as the postage goes, are there trends that are going to remain in place that you think are going to keep that number?
No, no. I already see it going down. Yeah, it was town clerk's office, bulk of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Aren't they raising the rates?
What?
Isn't postal raising the rates?
The proposal,
We
there's a
just
proposal
did.
of it, I think.
Is it so?
It might be
For a
proposed.
stamp, I saw. Well, I'll move to accept the line item transfers in the amount of $331,530.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept line item transfers as presented, total amount of $331,530. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, and this is a good segue into our next item here, which is to discuss and act on using fund balance in the amount of $350,000 for Dow Road Bridge Project, matching state of Connecticut grant. So Kevin had touched on that briefly just now. From what I understand, because I know Mary Ann was talking about a little bit at the selectmen's meeting, it's basically this bridge should have been addressed like, what, by a decade or more, probably ago?
Just about a decade, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that if it does not get addressed like now, then I mean, it could even be shut down because of the safety.
Right. The idea that the state of Connecticut comes out and does its bridge reviews and puts a list and categorizes the worst ones in this, up in that upper echelon.
Yeah.
So they wanted us to try to do something with this. That's why part of the reason why we were able to get that grant. We didn't even think we were going to get it because you don't know. You really don't know how much money the state's going to be able to access, especially in COVID. We had no idea. So we put the application in. I think we put $15,000 into the 5-year cap for it, thinking that maybe if it did come through, we can start the engineering process, or it would be at least starting the engineering for next year, and it came through. I think you'll note that there's a few other projects that have been coming through lately. I think the federal government has been loosening the strings on the money. They were just talking about, we're into the next phase now of what would be, this is the continuation of Quinnebog Valley Trail, and that's a $2.7 million project, of which we as a town are responsible for $555, roughly $1,000 for that. We actually put in our budget for this year $230, because towards the end of the process, we heard from Congressman Courtney saying, we think we can get this forward, to go forward. So it does help tremendously. So if it did come through, we had the 230 in our budget allocated already as part of what was passed. And then next year we make an adjustment to pick up the rest of it, and we can get that portion completed. That's just a few of them. We're talking about other things that we're doing, but this one right here came forward to the town of Plainfield, and we were happy to say, what's the next steps? So that's why we're here in front of the board, to ask what might be able to be done.
How long is that going to take?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer for that, though.
Bridge at my house took about 6-7 months.
Yeah.
I'm still in the
Hopefully not as long as the
It'll be faster than the overpass on 395.
Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't make promises.
I mean, while we appreciate the fact the state can help us out in some of these things, we do have to go with what their guidelines are, and they'll be, once approved, we can go through a pre-meeting with them and talk about all the steps, what has to be done, and it will be notifications out to the public as well.
There's no chance of getting any federal money for this, too.
We'll keep trying.
No, I was just curious.
Yeah,
They use it
issue
on
with
the
this
bridge
one-
near my house.
Yeah, the issue is with this one, it's requiring a match.
So how long has this bridge been in that red alert threshold?
I have to go back in the office and look and see when that last report came out, but I think it's been there for a few years, like close to, probably 8 or 9. Yeah, they've been targeting this particular bridge in Plainfield. That's been the highest of theirs in Plainfield for quite some time.
And are there any like comparable repair jobs where quotes or expenditures might be available, just to get a ballpark of what the actual
The final numbers?
final number?
Usually the state does that, that's why they came up with 700, but I can look it up for you if you like.
What's the,
I checked on that, right, Kelly? The bridge near me was 700 and something thousand. 60?
771, something
Yeah.
like that.
and what's the timeline on their guidelines? I'm assuming that they would probably have a say over who's allowed to bid on the project, or?
Yep, I'm going to be going to a pre-hearing on that, and we'll talk about that information. I will gladly share that with the board the next meeting.
And this sum of money would have to go to a town meeting?
Yes, the way the charter reads, if you approve this to come from the, the fund balance and taking it from there, then it does have to go in front of the town. Because it's over a certain threshold.
What's the threshold, 50?
It's between 50 and 100, and I think after that, after the 100, then we have to go to a referendum.
So be it.
Any other questions on the bridge project? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the amount of $350,000 from the fund balance to go towards the Dow Road Bridge project. Also sending this next to a town meeting. I believe we discussed the 29th of June.
Yes, that would be enough time to give it a 10-day notice. The second part of that would be at a town meeting, it adjourns to.
Yeah, at a later date. So we would be again. The motion would be to approve that amount from the fund balance and also send to town meeting for Tuesday, June 29th at 7 p.m. here at town hall.
Why do they have to do both?
The way, we found that out when we talked about the radio system is it requires that approval to go to referendum.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's in the wording of the motion.
Yeah, we're looking to clean up a little bit of the wording on that, but basically that's what it says. It says if you're over 100,000, we need approval to then go to a referendum. If they said no right there at that meeting, then it's done.
Yeah. All right, so Gary, you had made the
I
motion.
made the motion. I'll second.
Gary, Don seconds. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Was there a date specified?
Tuesday, June 29th. Yep, 7 p.m. here at town hall for the town meeting. All right, next item, review current fiscal year 2021 town budget statement.
Do you want me to start off with revenue?
Yeah.
Okay. So to date, as you know, we got education cost share funding. We're short 37,000. Adult education, we budgeted 110. We're not going to receive that. That's offset with the school's education budget as a grant. So we will not see that. Town aid roads came in a little higher, $1,200 more. What else? Municipal revenue sharing state sales tax, that funding did come in. It's not posted here, but I did receive it this week. So it came in at 144,000, so that is accurately budgeted. The revenue that you're going to be short in, tuition out of town and tuition special education. We received 4 payments from Sterling for both of those categories, and there's no more payments to come. So we're going to be short like 227,000 and 103,000 for those 2 items. So our expenditures have to offset that shortage now to net out to the fund balance. So honestly, we would be giving more to the fund balance if we weren't in that situation, but we have to net it together and then it goes to the fund balance. So
why is that figure lower from Sterling?
why what?
Why did the figure from Sterling lower?
I don't know. I think less students, but I don't know the education budget.
That money would probably be coming from the state to Sterling, and Sterling would probably.
Sterling cuts us a check. The checks that I see that come into our town is from Sterling.
Right, but I'm saying.
Yeah, for
Before
education cost share, for
Sterling cuts the
education
check
cost
to
share, yeah.
us, right, that's money that they're receiving from the state, so
Yeah,
it's probably mimicked through the same formula that arrives at us receiving a little bit less than our ECS funding. Now, that sounds like a question for the Board of Ed that they should be able to answer.
I do remember a reference though made by that for Ron and Ken. They
Yeah.
had said how it was going to be going
the
down.
enrollment went down.
Right,
Yeah,
enrollment went down, and so to be expected.
correct.
Then, of course, I remember asking the question of, so how are we going to make that
Yeah,
to be determined?
right, exactly. Our building permits, we received the Amazon one, that's not posted here yet, so we're just waiting for all the final steps. I don't know if that'll get posted in this fiscal year or next fiscal year, so you'll see it once it's posted. Planning and zoning permit for Amazon too, that's not posted yet, so once everything's pulled together, either this year or next year. Town clerk fees, right now, they're over budget in revenue, 115,000. I estimate them bringing in another 40,000, so you'll be over 150,000 estimate in that. So that's beneficial if we're trying to make up the lost revenue. I guess those are the high, let's see. We did take in some money for recreation. Budget of 50,000. Right now I have 13,000. I just received some receipts today. So I would assume 28,000, 30,000 is what you'll bring in there for summer rec. Not much for the pool still. I mean, there's some revenue coming in, but not substantial. And that's, and then property tax revenue on the second page. You can see we only have 48,000 to collect left for the whole year, so that's it. And last year at this time, we collected 30,000, I want to say, by the month of June. So you could hit that. So I don't know, any questions on the revenue?
I have a question.
Yep,
Fund balance for school pension.
yep.
They haven't put anything in, have they?
Well, the school gave me 200,000 and then another 100,000 recently. And I made sure that got deposited for the month of June, so 300,000. That's what we received. So the rest comes from the fund balance, yes.
And at our last meeting, what was quoted, that should have been put in? 650 at least?
Yeah,
I just want to have that on record.
okay. Yep. You want to look at the expenditures now?
On the revenue side,
Yep.
Massanutten people up.
Yeah, sometimes we receive that. I'm still waiting for the last payment, so you're gonna get that. I mean, I haven't read any information saying you're not going to receive that, so you might just receive it on June 30th.
Then police other duty,
What is it, special duty?
police other duty.
Other duty, yes, I'm gonna be posting that. I have to wait to see what the receivable is at the end of the year, and then I post the revenue. So I'm estimating about 30 to 35,000. And the expenditures, the year is almost over, so you can see a bulk of the revenue, a bulk of the salary is 6% left in all the categories pretty much.
And the town clerk with the supplies,
Yep,
we just moved some money out.
yeah,
That would give them a balance of about $320 from what you have for
Yep.
available.
yep, correct,
Does that sound about right?
yeah,
That's enough for the rest of the year?
yeah, yeah. I just want to note, health insurance this year was very beneficial because of COVID. We had a lot of employees not taking doctor appointments and we're self-insured, so I don't have the influx of all the claims coming in. So that's where we saved a lot of our money.
How many employees do we have? About that many, huh?
I want to say like full-time and part-time right now, on payroll right now, is probably like 90. It'll increase once we have summer recreation come on board.
Still looking for lifeguards for the pool?
Got 3 more,
Okay.
and there's a deposit for 40.
All right, so we still have the money for do that.
So you still have to update the ice rink since you already bought it, right? So it's a little zero now.
He's about to purchase.
You're gonna be the first one on the ice rink. Gary.
That's my other update.
Remember, you need a song for when you go out there too.
On the council of governments, I thought that's usually a hard number.
Well,
thought so
it's
too.
paramedics. It's the paramedics.
Paramedic side of it, yeah.
So we're in a contract with the Council of Government for paramedics, when the ambulance, if you need a paramedics in there or not. And last year, we were over in that. This year, we weren't. So we get charged for that.
When you get the flag for the flagpoles,
Everything came in. Well, you see them all up and down the streets right now.
You need to go back to revenue, Kelly,
Yep.
on the IPOC sales, we don't have anything yet.
No.
Yes, contingency numbers, so they have a right to review the property, and so that's what they're doing right now.
Question for the chief on expenses. I'm assuming that 144,000 savings is because you were understaffed at the moment?
Correct. So the 3 positions that we had, we couldn't fill to June because of the academy. Didn't have anything open until June, which recently they just started. So that's that whole year, pretty much of those savings due to COVID.
But you have cadets in training right now?
That is correct.
How many?
3?
And when do you expect them to complete the training?
Oh, boy. You're talking about a year out. At minimum.
And what will that then make the total?
19.
Well, that'll just be the 19?
That would just bring us to our number that we've been at. We just couldn't.
Does that include you two?
That is correct.
Yeah, I expect that, some of these, we've had some obviously big projects and things that we needed to long overdue upgrade the police department, but I expect that in the near future, maybe within the next 2 to 3 years, that'll probably be something that we'll be looking for in the budget, is to put in probably an extra
Correct.
officer or 2.
Correct. I'm going to put a plan together and present it to the different boards, just so we can see the reason why and the need for the officers.
Did you have any trouble getting these 3?
So normally we'll have upwards of 100 people that apply, and of those 100, we'll lose 50 right off the bat because they won't show up to part of the testing, and then half of them will fail physical agility, and we'll be lucky if we got 1 or 2. This time we had 11 that actually applied, and believe it or not, we have 5 solid candidates out of the 11, which is kind of unheard of because you only get 1 or 2 out of 100. But this time we had 11, so we weren't sure, but we had a good solid 5. We could have picked 1 through the 5. So depends on how you want to look at it. At least this time we did have a solid 5 candidates for the positions.
Any local?
2 local. Local as in like nearby town, local, not
Right,
very far,
right.
yes.
Eastern Connecticut.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on the town budget statement?
I have a question for the first selectman. Capital expenses, capital improvement, we still have 112,000 available, is that correct? How am I misreading this? Oh, we spent a lot.
What page?
Which page are you on, Steve?
I'm on page 9. Budget is 122,512, and we've actually spent 95,15. Am I understanding that correctly, Kelly?
What page? Because it goes up to page 8. It goes up to page 8.
I got page 9.
Oh my God,
It's
that's
under
bizarre.
capital expenses.
Capital expenses, okay, hold on. Yep.
Are you looking at it?
Okay, capital expenses, yep. Oh, so 120 left. So LoCIP, local capital improvements. So that's state funded, and what happens is the state will allocate us, say, 122,000 this year. If we don't use it, you have to use it for certain projects, okay? If you don't use it for those projects, it rolls into next year. So it keeps rolling. So as of this year, we only used 9,000, and that was for the new the website. Yep.
It's like a revolving grant, basically.
Yeah, yeah, it's for all like capital purchases, like you can pave roads, you can do projects in town without that funding. Can't use it for operating.
Purchase of a new mower for the highway?
No, that would be town aid.
Town aid, okay.
Yeah, town aid, not LoCIP.
How long's your contract with Willie Waste?
5 years.
What you're in it now?
We just signed it.
Just signed it? Oh.
The previous one was 5 years also, and it was a 9% increase over every year for 5 years. This one is 5 years and it's 3% each year.
Each year, 3% each year.
Any other questions or comments for the town budget statement? If not, moving on to our next item, which is review current fiscal year 2021 Board of Education financial statement. I know that got forwarded to everyone. One comment I will make is kind of bouncing off what you were saying earlier, Dean, in regards to the pension. I'm in full support, certainly, of bringing that subject up periodically, but particularly to the Board of Ed. And we can certainly discuss that and it's not just necessarily during the budget season, because I mean, we've talked quite a bit about pension among other things then, but my suggestion would be is not in July, because they don't have a official Board of Ed meeting in July, but August they do, and of course they do every month after that. Maybe in August or September, I think it would be a good idea probably to attend the Board of Education meeting, and they always have their public forum there for anybody, any board member, any member of the public who can make any comment or question or concern they like. And I think it would be a good idea, not just, I talk constantly to the chair of the Board of Ed and the superintendent. I'm going to be getting to know more our new superintendent and seeing what, goals that he has in place in the coming year. But besides, myself talking to him, I think it would be nice to also see from other Board of Finance members that there certainly are concerns about how we need to not be shorting our contributions to pension in future years. And the fund balance is not the permanent answer of where money is going to come from to fund pension. So I think it's a good idea to just throw it out there to the Board of Education, see what maybe response you get. And of course, they know that, don't have much to say as of now, and they will expect more, come next budget season. So that among, anything else, we can also talk about with continual decline in enrollment, are we going to be able to continue to financially support all these buildings that we have, all of our supplies, all of our equipment? Because as we know, it's a massive budget. There's a lot of capital that we have in our school system, but there's been a very steady trend going downward of enrollment, which is not good. Some people I know don't always like to acknowledge it or talk about it, but it is something that we really need to, not beat around the bush on, but really, take head on. And that is one thing that I hope to discuss more with the new superintendent and see, again, going forward, if we're looking ahead to the next 2 years, the next 5 years, I mean, what are some goals or some plans that maybe the Board of Ed has discussed or has in mind that we need to do to try to figure this out? So that, among any other subjects, certainly can be brought up to the Board of Ed.
How can we get an actuary to back up his number, how much we should have for retirement? 80%, 90%, 60%, what? Who's the actuary that's going to put his neck on the line and say, this is the number? And
Well,
why do you have to have that much?
Well, what they do, it'll be this year. It'll be in July of 2021. They'll pull it together. Hooker & Holcomb is the company that we use, and they'll pull together how much you should be contributing each year. Okay, so the actuary will tell you what you should contribute each year to be 100% funded. And then it's up to the board to determine, do I want to do what they're requiring of me, or do I not want to do what's required of me? So that's the board's decision if you want to make it up to 100% over a period of time or not. And the benefit of that is if you ever go out to bonding for a project, I mean, that's looked good if you can, contribute a portion, a higher portion than what the actuary is requiring of you, versus depleting it. Then that's frowned upon. So it doesn't look like you can afford, say, the pension plan. So you have to think of that for the future if we ever go out to bond.
And when they say 100%, 100% of what?
So
The payments that they have to make?
it's 100% funded. So say if we close the doors tomorrow, how much that plan would cost us? Like how much that plan based on your age 50, I'm age 50, someone next to me is age 30, what they do for a living, it's all created, and that's how it's calculated.
So if we
The
were-
cost of the plan.
If we were to close tomorrow,
Mhm.
I mean, other than some kind of a catastrophe, I don't know why we would close.
Uh-huh.
What the hell do we care? We ain't got the money, that's why we're closing. We're worried about a pension?
Well, the funds would be your principals being held in either investment accounts or whatever, and there's a legal obligation, liability on our part, that
For town and road.
that's just it. So even if the doors did close tomorrow, people
Right.
who would no longer be in our employment would still be entitled to whatever percentage stake. And if I read the situation correctly, the amount of principal we've contributed over the past dozen years or so has been far below where their projections and rate of return on those investments would be able to make everybody whole again on what they what they are vested in for.
The amount that the Board of Education has been funding goes back 40 years when I was on the Board of Ed. We didn't do it then and it ain't being done now. What's changed? Are we beating a dead horse? What are we at now, any idea?
Probably 86%. I want to say 86.
Pardon me?
86%
Wow,
funded.
that's terrific.
86.
Unless you're in the 14%.
That's a good point.
And remember, the younger you are, the more likely you are to be in that 14%.
If you don't mind, I can piggyback off something that was mentioned before. Your concern is also for your bond rating, because they look at that and say, are you doing the right things or not? And that could either increase or decrease your bond rating, which is also the time to go out to bond. If you don't mind, I'd like to work with the Board of Education and the Board of Finance to come up with plans for what we do for future, such as HVAC systems in the PCS, PMS school we talked about when we were on the Board of Education. That's over 20 years now. Now is the time to start really putting it together to say, if we have to go out to bond for some of those items, how do we do it? And not have a huge impact for the residents because they don't want their taxes going up because of it. The best we can do is sit down now, start the plan for later, and that does tie into what your bond rating is and what you're being able to pay out. The question is, well, you didn't put into the pension for years ago. Sooner or later, you can't keep on going back to the fund balance and keep on rating that to cover that number. We won't have a fund balance left eventually. So that's part of the reason why we have to think about what we're doing and making sure those parties are responsible to pay the right numbers. So we're starting that conversation. I think it's a good start, and we need to continue that conversation.
You sit down with the Board of Education and you're asking for the money, they say no. What do you do?
Oh, that's their I guess the question will be going back to the actuarials, what's the low end we can go with? Because
It's up to the boards. It's
really
not the
there.
actuarial, it's not up to them. It's up to the board to determine what they want to, how they want to
But we
run
get
the town.
suggestions.
Actuarial can give
Yeah.
them a figure, that's it.
And I remember that's what the auditor said.
Yeah,
If somebody did directly ask the auditor,
It's
as
up
far
to
as
the-
what's your recommendation of what we should be, and then that's up to the local leadership, local boards to
Yeah.
decide that.
correct.
And there's certain variables that they have to assume going forward because you're talking about investments over a very long period of time.
Right.
So there is an enormous amount of fluctuation that can happen, or black swans, COVID, for example, that can dramatically alter where those models are putting their outlays in terms of liabilities. So variables can make recommendations based on what they know now. Exactly nobody is going to be able to tell us what the number needs to be to guarantee a certain return.
I would say there's one other factor that will play over the next few years up to 2024. The ESSER monies and America CARES Act monies that are coming in will help to offset some of the operationals. And that then can say, if you're doing that, using those money for operationals, then you can utilize some of the monies going to other areas, such as HVAC systems, such as pensions. So that's the discussions we need to sit down and talk about, how we were able to do that properly and minimize the impact to, again, the taxpayer.
But to also go back to like what Ted was saying, I mean, when we get to the budget season again, and it's time to look over the Board of Education's budget, and if we're not satisfied with obviously what they're putting in there to go towards it, I mean, the solution is that we don't approve it, because it can't go beyond us unless the Board of Finance approves it, and then of course we got to keep going back and forth. Nobody necessarily wants to do that because it could be time consuming, and people just want to move the process along. But the truth is, that's it. We don't have to approve. We can say, go back to the Board of Ed meeting and talk over how we can get more input in here, and then come back to the Board of Finance, represent it, explain to us what adjustments you made to get it there, and then maybe we'll send it to get voted on, after that. But that's really the situation we've been in. And then as I recommended before, the other thing is starting early on. Gary went to the budget workshop until like January, February is when usually February is when they do their budget workshop. So that's a good starting point too. Board of Finance members go to the budget workshop, listen closely to the different schools and their proposals, and then particularly listen to where's the discussion on the pension and how much is being proposed to put in there.
Board of Finance, you first have to sit down and decide what the number is.
Yeah, we can talk certainly before,
So
before we get to that
The
point.
whole thing starts with us. Good idea. That could work.
I would keep in mind, though, that the budget workshop probably isn't the ideal starting point for that, because by the time they're at that point, they've developed their budget probably about 3/4 of the way. So it's never too early, I think, to be approaching and talking about a specific line item such as that.
And they're not really very detailed at that, when you go through school year.
And actually, I think, Matt, it was you, I think you had made the suggestion of an idea that we should have that on the budget calendar, which, we have since added, because it wasn't historically necessarily something we talked about on the budget calendar, and I know for a couple that I went to in my early years, I was pretty much the only one there. There wasn't always necessarily, but it's good to see, it's good to see Gary go, I know you've gone, and other members have gone too, so I think that's good, it's a good starting point. You also avoid that situation of trying to approach Board of Ed in late April and make a, suggestion, expecting them to do a 180, and of course you get the usual response, which is, well, coming up on public hearing, and it's kind of crunch time, it's late, but it's like, I've heard that before, but it's like, to me, it's not an excuse I want to hear. It's like, when we're talking about important things like pension, it's like, I don't want to hear the response of like, well, it's too late to talk about that, or now we're not really considering it. So that's why my suggestion is start, obviously, as early on as you can, get them thinking about it, and see what happens from there.
Because ultimately, we're not talking about, a $10,000 to $20,000 variance somewhere. We're talking, on 6 figures closer to the million side on the scale that the pension has been underfunded. And we need to be addressing that in the proper context as well. And it deserves a lot more attention, probably a lot more commitment than it's received.
And I know in talking to our first selectman, it really would be a gradual process. So I kind of looked at a good starting point. This has been a high topic of discussion, was the $800,000 that came from the fund balance for this fiscal year. So a lot of people obviously were unhappy about it, even though the budget did get it passed, it did go through. But I know afterwards, in a lot of kind of feedback conversations that I had, people were like, this is not something that can continue. And I agree. So the point is all right, so you got this 1 year of $800,000 from the fund balance to go towards it, so that needs to get slashed, And so, not doing as much this year, but we still are taking a pretty good chunk out of it. So going into next year, that needs to be cut down even more, and obviously get it down to 0. But like you were saying, though, when we're talking about, close to, $500,000, and we're talking about those numbers, it's certainly no easy task, I understand, for the Board of Education to, with everything else they have to fund, and all their mandatory, funding they have to do that's non-negotiable, salary contracts, I understand it's not an easy position to be in, but we still got to talk about it.
When you say $500,000 or $1 million, based on whose figures?
Right. That was just
Your figures,
right.
your figures, his figures?
Right.
Right. And at this point, I think most of our conversation is just based off the last figure we had from the report last
So
July.
we set a figure, we set the number here to start with, don't you think? And then we use our figure.
If that's where the first step of this process is, then our next meeting or the meeting right after is going to be when this conversation starts.
Let's say before school starts.
We'll start the conversation.
Yeah, no, we can certainly have that as an agenda for an upcoming meeting.
I have one observation on the Board of Ed report, and I wasn't able to attend their meeting last week. And I guess it's more about the language used in it. And Kelly, I'll field the question to you because you might have an idea on how to translate it. Point number 3 under the 2020-2021 fiscal year, the town posted the second payment of the special education excess aid as a school refund. The refund will be applied as an offset to tuition expenditures.
Yeah.
So what, can you
So,
walk me through that process?
yeah, special education is paid to the town, and I transfer the money up to the school department under school refunds, because the school has special education expenditures. So they're out of their operating special education expenditures. So when the money comes in, it just reduces that net effect.
Okay.
So that's all it is.
It's an
And
interesting.
officially, they have to officially request that money, even though it's transferred up there, but they officially have to request it from the town.
Okay, because the little snippet here continues to say that they're determining the amounts and the accounts to which the refund is applied.
On their side of the
On
book.
their side,
Yeah.
right, so to call it a school refund, and this is where we need a Board of Ed, probably Ron,
Right.
to field the question to, it sounds like they can spread those dollars across the different
Yeah.
special ed programs.
Yeah,
at the different
transportation for
schools.
special ed, all the different categories.
Different buckets, yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else on the Board of Education financial statement?
Looks like they'll still be around $900,000 under budget.
Yep, that's what I heard Ron say. Yeah, last time. If there's nothing else, I would open the floor for citizens' participation.
Art Gagnon, only one comment. If you're going to talk to the Board of Ed, I don't know how low the enrollment is or is going to be, but as far as the MBR, you might want to question, if that could be lowered. I don't know where that's at with the enrollment. I don't know how their figures work out, but
Yeah, you can certainly ask about that. Yeah.
I had a couple of questions. The HVAC installation for the building here, does that take into account the electrical upgrades that are going to be needed?
That was something that was discussed previously. We still have to discuss it. I'm not sure if it's going to be, how much, I know your committee is working on that, for this building.
The electrical in this building is a mess.
Yep.
And that's more of a priority, I think, than air conditioning, to be honest with you, because we don't want to burn down the building because of electrical issue. And have we looked into possible grants for the HVAC upgrades through possibly Eversource?
Have not looked at those yet. I know our grant writer's been looking all along, but nothing's come across his desk for that, so.
Because they used to, they had, you're talking to go with Douglas Split, correct? They had grants if you were going to do those to help with that. In the past, I don't know where the program sits, if it's still around, or if it's even available to municipalities or businesses. And then the other question I have is on the fund balance. Where are we looking at being after we take all this money out of it? We're taking a lot of money out of the fund balance. What's our numbers going to be? What are they currently, and what are we looking to be?
Yeah, I estimated, last audit, I think we were 18, and then once we deplete for this budget, like 16, and next year, 2022 budget, about 13%. But that's not, they said 2 months. GFOA recommends 2 months of expenditures. And as our budget grows, obviously, the two months of expenditures is bigger.
At 13%, where are you?
1.5 months.
So how are we going to fix that to get back to the 2?
Well, we do have revenues coming in from Amazon that'll help to increase that.
We can only count on that so much, because if you keep saying we look at Amazon, that money dries up, we're using it up fast.
It's also something, Sean, that the Board of Finance will definitely have on an upcoming agenda, and as I've done periodically, which is discuss the fund balance, discuss the policy, discuss not just what we could use money in the fund balance for, but how to replenish it.
It seems like we discussed replenishing the fund balance every year, and I don't ever really remember a resolution.
Our fund balance policy states, though, if you go below 10%, you have to fund it back up to 10% if you ever fall below 10% within 2 years. That's what that says.
Should that be raised to 13? Or
We had a
whatever
discussion
2
on
months
that
is?
in 2018. We did have a discussion in 2018 about it, but that's the last time we discussed it.
So yeah, again, it's up when they find an agenda item, it's up to the Board of Finance to discuss and if we increase it.
Just mentioning it. Okay.
That fund balance is in reserved and unreserved portions, correct?
the fund balance, has some reserve portions, yes.
But that's getting hit
That-
this year
that's-
also, correct?
That's reserved, not unrestricted. When I talk about fund balance, being the 13% should be unrestricted, so, you know,
Yeah, but you're also looking to hit the reserve fund balance this year also, correct? For possibly acquisitions?
oh, you're talking about open space?
Is that
Open
what-
space, that's
where you
reserve
pull that
fund.
from?
Yeah, that's reserve fund, yeah. I don't know the amount yet. We don't know the amount yet.
Oh, I didn't ask. that.
I
just know it's getting hit.
can
Oh,
mention
okay.
that tonight if you'd like.
Yeah, it's okay.
So I mentioned that there were a number of things that were in play for different things coming forward. We were talking about open space, and there is an opportunity for the town. We have 139 acres in one area that is currently open space, but it's landlocked. So we are looking to come forward with an opportunity to purchase some adjacent land to it, and in doing so, to raise that up to 162 acres of open space. What do you use this particular open space for? It would be for walking trails, hiking trails, horse trails. It could be some open field area as well. So we're looking at, we've discussed an offer with two landowners to purchase those different lands, one for 20 acres, one for 4. And once we get the next steps to that, we'll bring it back to your board to bring it to an eventual town meeting. So that's that open space is roughly 420, something like that.
Yeah.
And so this would be only about a quarter of that. And another point you were mentioning about where do you replenish your revenues to, I can say Amazon, but I can also say that we have 2 energy plants, solar energy plants, which we're in contract with right now when they come to fruition, which we anticipate the end of the year. And one is going to be putting about between $85,000 and $90,000 a year to the town of Plainfield for 30 years. The second one, when it comes to fruition through a setting council passage, will also be about $156,000 a year for 20 years. So there's more areas for revenue to be coming in. There's also a third site, and that's going to be about between 35 and 40,000. It's a smaller site. They're doing something different, but that'll be for 20 years as well. So there is something there on the horizon for revenues, so we can get through the second council for the final steps.
It's just hard to say we might have this coming in, or we got a good, strong possibility this is coming in. We're gonna spend the money now, we gotta be careful, because if something falls through, we're gonna be in trouble. I just don't wanna have to get a tax rate increase.
Well, this year we don't, but next year.
Our police force does a remarkable job with the limited amount of resources they have as far as personnel, equipment, and the building itself. I would encourage, as you have time, to do a tour yourself, because I noticed some things that I think that we really need to have the police chief kind of fill us in and give us more details than I could, but one of the things that I'd like to bring to attention to the Board of Finance now to consider for the future is they have a records management system that is about to become obsolete. And I think it's something that, in light of the activities in the town, such as the uptake in service calls, it is something that we need to look at to bring, at least bring attention to it. There's some other things I noticed about the building that, in my opinion, are almost health hazards. They have some leaks, one of which is over, Chief, remind me again where that was? Evidence room.
Correct. Server room as well.
Yeah, and I think that if we put Band-Aids on things, we run into problems, and it needs to be looked at. And I wanted to just, first of all, encourage our other members to take a tour. The chief and his sergeant were very accommodating, sacrificing their time, and just very, very informative. And I really, my biggest concern is that records management system, because there's only 7 of them in the state right now, and soon it's going to be obsolete. If it ever crashes, then we have a real serious problem.
Does anybody ever recall them being denied for any of that stuff?
Was that in your budget this year, Chief?
No, just
Yeah,
the,
that's what it is.
What I was going to say on that note is, I believe, just as a quick poll count, I think everybody here was on board. We actually, prior to COVID, did a Board of Finance tour. So it was a meeting,
Okay.
but then we had to go into executive session because obviously we're going in parts of the police station that are confidential. So, but I thought that was a very helpful meeting to have. And again, I'm pretty sure everybody here was on it, and that kind of brought us to light with some of the things you were mentioning, because even back then, it might have been an issue, and some of the things that we have since resolved in the past 2 years, because they've been in capital improvement, or they were in the proposed budget, and we approved it and sent it to the townspeople. So it is something, Dean, that we've been looking at, but on that note, I was going to mention it also to the chief that I was thinking through the calendar, timing-wise, because we have a municipal election, we'll see if we get any new Board of Finance members come November, but then probably shortly thereafter, probably after the holidays, so maybe January, February,
that would work, absolutely.
we would be looking at setting up maybe another one of those like we did a couple of years ago. So we have any new members there, sure. Now, I wouldn't mind going again. Again, I've seen the whole place, but we can see things that maybe have changed in the past couple of years, and certainly what you're going to be looking to propose in the next fiscal year. Any other questions, comments for citizens participation? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So be it.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned, 7:48.